What's up, guys? I hope you're having an awesome day. Today's Memorial Day, and it's gonna be crowded as crap in Washington, D.C. How did you sleep?
I slept good.
So, for once, I actually got some decent sleep. But yeah, the other guy that was in our room yesterday, he apparently got in the wrong room. Thank you. So he moved like to room 3 something, I don't know. He had to move out, that's the point. But I had to breakfast, and apparently the breakfast here is really, really good, so let's see what they got. What do we have? Milk. I'm still looking around. What do we have? French toast, pancakes, eggs. It looks alright. Sausage.
Different types.
Italian sausage. Bread. What is that?
Potatoes. Breakfast potatoes.
Americans. Alright, not the healthiest breakfast, but all American style. We got some eggs and bacon and pancakes with syrup and a banana and orange juice, so. We're in Washington. The hotel is actually not like in Washington, D.C. It's like a small town called Herndon, something like that in Virginia. So the bus ride here with the tour guide is like a 40-minute drive from the hotel to Washington, but it's going great so far.
Our pictures of, some of you are already taking them. This is what we call the west front of the Capitol. So when we talk about the Capitol, when we talk about the White House, these are the two most important buildings that we have in Washington. Again, this is our legislative branch of government, so like parliaments, but we call it Congress here. And the White House is the home of the president. Because those buildings are so important, they don't actually have a front and a back. They have two fronts. Why don't they have a back? Well, believe it or not, it's as simple as this. If there was a back side of the building, people would assume it was a less important side of the building. So we don't have a back here, we have two fronts. This side we call the west front. If you were to go to the other side, we call it the east front. But here on the west front, this is where the presidential inaugurations take place. Ever since 1981 with President Ronald Reagan, his first inauguration, ever since then, they've taken place on this side of the building. But prior to that, they would have been on the other side of the building or on the east front of the Capitol. So for example, John F. Kennedy, when he was inaugurated in 1961, President Abraham Lincoln, both of his inaugurations, they would have been on the far side of the building.
Could you explain the thing again that the capital, Washington, D.C. is actually not a part of any of the 50 states?
Yes, so Washington, D.C. is what we call a federal district, and it would have at one time, the land that D.C. is located on would have been part of the state of Maryland.
Okay.
What they did was they took land from Maryland and they took land from the state of Virginia to create a new place called the District of Columbia.
Okay.
But the land that was taken from Virginia was given back to Virginia in 1846. So the only land that remains part of the District of Columbia would have been the land originally given from Maryland. But we are a separate federal district, so we're not a state, we're not part of a state, and because we're not a state, we do not have representation in the United States Congress.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Alright, so we're just like kind of jumping, hopping around Washington, D.C., looking at all the sightseeing stuff, all the memorials and the monuments and stuff, so yeah.
So a couple things I want to tell you about the White House. Number one, I'm going to be showing you what is called the north front of the White House. The other side would be called the south front. Again, no fronts and back, two fronts. From the north front, it will look to us like there are only 2 floors. There are in fact 4 main levels and a total of 6 levels in the White House. But one of those levels from this side is underground, you won't see it at all. The first visible row of windows, we call it the state floor, and that's where many of the rooms that the public can tour are located. For example, the blue room, the red room, the east room, which is the largest room in the White House. The second row of windows is actually the 3rd floor, we call it the residence. That is literally where the president and the first family live. At the top of the White House, you'll see a stone railing that goes around what just looks like the roof of the White House, but there's an entire level up there, also part of the residence. So it will look to you as if there are only 2 floors, but there are in fact 4 main levels and a total of 6 levels. That's one thing I want you to keep in mind. Here's another thing I want you to keep in mind. When this building was built, this is the oldest public building in Washington. It was built from 1792 till 1800. For that time period, the White House would have been considered quite large. Maybe not by today's standards, but for that time it would have been considered quite large. And here's the last thing I want you to remember. When you look at the White House, George Washington was the only president in our country that never lived in the White House because they were building it while he was president. But every president after him has lived in the White House, beginning with our second president, John Adams. So George Washington, he never actually lived here, but he did play an important role in the building's construction. He looked at the designs, the original plans of the White House. He said, that looks too much like a palace. That looks like where a king would live. And we were setting up a new type of government without a monarch. We were setting up an elected leader or a president. And Washington wanted to show that we don't have a king, we don't have a monarch, we have someone who is elected by the people, and so he deliberately shrank the plans of the White House. This is called the Korean War Veterans Memorial, and it was dedicated here in Washington in the year 1995. You guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What you'll see here are statues. They will be on our left as we walk through the memorial. Each statue is made out of stainless steel, and they are just a little bit taller than an average man, so that when you see them, because we don't actually get to walk up right next to them, because they are just a little bit taller than the height of an average man, they'll actually look like actual soldiers, and they'll be the correct height, because we'll be just a little bit further away from them as we walk through. They are meant to look as though they are a platoon of soldiers on scout patrol, meaning they're scouting through the Korean countryside. They're looking for enemy soldiers. There is never a time when you are in this memorial that you will not have at least one statue either looking directly at you or at least facing in your direction. Because again, the idea is they're looking around for the enemy. My favorite time to come here is actually at night, because at night these statues are not very well lit, and normally that would be a bad thing. But here, because these statues are not very well lit, people often tell me they think they see them moving at night. They don't move. It's not meant to be weird or creepy. Point is, they're so detailed and so realistic that people have that feeling at night because the statues are not well lit. On our right, as we walk in, you guys are going to see a wall. This wall will have images engraved into the wall of soldiers that would have served in the Korean War. When you see these images, they are not drawings of what a soldier might have looked like. They're actual images taken from pictures of soldiers that served in the war. There's about 2,400 images in total. When we get to the front, there's a flagpole. On the right is a wall with a quote. It's going to say, "Freedom is not free." And a lot of people do ask me, why do we have these war memorials? What's the point? Are they intended to honor war? And the simple answer is no. These memorials are not intended to honor war. They're intended to honor those who have served in war, those who have sacrificed, and especially those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice, given their lives. So this is the Lincoln Memorial. It is perhaps the most famous memorial that we have in Washington, D.C. It was dedicated here in the year 1922, just about 60 years after Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed. That also took place here in Washington, D.C. On the night of April 14th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated only about 6 blocks away from the White House. He was watching a play in a place called Ford's Theater. He was shot in the middle of that play. This was just after the main Confederate general during the American Civil War, a man named Robert E. Lee, had surrendered. It was a few days after his surrender. So this memorial opens in 1922. There's 36 columns that go around the outside of the memorial. They will represent the states in our country at the time of Lincoln's presidency. When you go up the stairs here, you'll notice they change color. It's darker granite at the bottom and then lighter marble as you go further up into the memorial. Where those stairs change color is a landing, and that landing has an engraving. So where those stairs change color, there is a landing. In the middle of that landing, there will be an engraving. And that engraving will mark the exact spot where in the year 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stands during what we call the Civil Rights March on Washington, delivers his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. I always encourage all of my groups to find that engraving and stand on it, because when you do, you'll be looking out, and from here you won't have the exact view, but you'll be looking out across a rectangular pool of water called the reflecting pool. You'll be looking down directly to the Washington Monument. That is perhaps the most famous view that we have in Washington, D.C., from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Monument. And it's also basically the same view that would have greeted Dr. King while he gave his speech in 1963. I say basically because there's one thing that will be missing today that would have been here while Dr. King gave his speech, and that's the crowd. There were about 250,000 people that were watching him. They filled the entire plaza here. They flanked both sides of the water, both sides of the reflecting pool. But other than the crowd, that view will basically be the same view that greeted Dr. King. Inside the memorial is a statue of Abraham Lincoln. The walls on either side contain engravings of two of the president's best known speeches. The speech that will be on the left of the statue is the Gettysburg Address, arguably the most famous presidential speech ever given, certainly the most famous ever given by Abraham Lincoln. The speech that will be on the right of the Lincoln statue is going to be his second inaugural address, which was delivered in 1865 at the start of his second term, not long before his death.
Guys, it's hot here. I'm sweating like crap. Like, I'm sweating bad. Like, it's hot in the south too, but it's like a different kind of hot here. I don't know, it's just like, just going from Mississippi to Washington, it's like in Mississippi the weather is like real hot most of the times, and the weather is humid, the air is thick, you know. Here it's not as humid, but it's still, like right now it's hot. My guess is like 85 degrees. It feels more like maybe 90 down in Mississippi.
This next memorial I think is going to be a little bit more crowded than the Korean memorial that we went through earlier today. This next memorial is called the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, or we call it the Vietnam Wall, or sometimes we just call it the Wall. This memorial is a little different compared to many of the memorials in Washington in the sense that I describe it this way. I say it is the closest thing we have to a cemetery without actually being a cemetery. There's nobody buried here, so that's why it's not a cemetery. But for many people, when they come here, what they will do, they will come to the memorial to look up a name. The name they may be looking up, it could be a father, could be a brother, could be a grandfather, somebody who served in Vietnam and who was killed as a result of the war. So when they look up that name on the wall here, it's no different than if they were to be visiting a headstone in a cemetery, for example. So it's the closest thing we have to a cemetery without it actually being a cemetery. This is actually the oldest of the war veterans memorials in Washington, D.C. What they did was, in the late 1970s, they held a competition to try to design this memorial, or to pick a design for this memorial. And the winning design was actually submitted by a woman who, at the time she designed it, was in college. She was a senior at Yale University. Her name is Maya Lin. Her design was chosen out of more than 1,200 designs that were submitted as part of this competition, because when you walk through the memorial here, you'll see it's a fairly simple design. It's a wall with names. There are over 58,300 names that are written on this wall, and every single name will be the name of a soldier who was killed as a direct result of this war. So if a Vietnam veteran is alive today, their name is not written on the memorial. Vietnam veterans who served in the war, came home from the war, and died later, but of unrelated causes, let's say, for example, that they were in a car accident or a plane crash, or they died of a natural illness, their name was not written onto the wall. And it's not because those veterans are less important or that their service was less honorable, but the designer of this memorial, Maya Lin, she wanted to show our country what this war cost our country. She thought the most effective way to do that was to just list the names of those killed as a direct result of this war. If you were to count every name on that wall, you would get a little over 58,300. So again, no one's buried here, but for many people, this is just like coming to a headstone in a cemetery, because they'll look up a name, they'll take a piece of paper up against the wall, and they'll make a tracing or an etching. We call it making a rubbing, that they take home with them, and that's going to have basically the outline of that person's name. The way the names are written on this memorial is they are written in chronological order based on the date of the person's death. The names start and end in the same spot. They start and end in the middle. In the middle of the memorial, the wall will be at its tallest point. It's over 10 feet tall there. You'll see 2 years written on the wall. The only years you'll see on the wall, the first and the last. 1959 is the first, 1975 is the last. So if you imagine for a moment that my umbrella is the middle of the memorial and I'm looking at it directly in front of me, I'll see the year 1959. The names go row after row after row, panel after panel down to my right. It's what we call the east wall. The east wall is a section of the memorial. If you can just glimpse it off in the distance there, it's pointing away from us. So again, imagining that my umbrella is the middle, when they reach the far end of the east wall, they then pick up on the far end of the west wall, or all the way down to my left. Then they come back, row after row, panel after panel, towards the middle, and they end right in front of me. Again, I'm standing at the middle. They end right in front of me, just above the year 1975. Why would the names start and end in the same spot? That seems unusual. Most people would expect them to start at one end and end at the other. Well, Maya Lin wants to do a couple things with this memorial. Again, she's the woman that designed it. She wants to show our country what this war cost our country. She does that by listing just the names of those killed as a direct result of the war. But she also wants to help bring an end to the war. And she's showing that that's one of her goals by linking the start and end point of the names.
Cannot go near the wall. They're doing like a security sweep because they're planning on having like a ceremony speech type of deal later, like sweeping people out of there because of safety reasons. So we're not allowed to go near and actually see the wall up close.
Here's what you guys are going to want to do while you're here. You're going to want to find your column for your state where you were staying while you were in the U.S. Because there's 56 columns that go around the outside of the memorial. Now each of those columns will represent one of the states in our country during World War II. But during World War II, we only had 48 states. So there are 2 states that have columns here, but they would not have been considered states during World War II. Those are our 2 most recent states of Alaska and Hawaii. You will see columns for other places like Puerto Rico. Not a state today, wasn't a state during World War II. The District of Columbia, again, not a state, not part of a state. So in total, there are 48 state columns here. There are 7 territorial columns, and then there's 1 column for the District of Columbia. The way the columns are placed is they go back and forth on either side of what is considered the main feature of the memorial. We call that the Wall of Stars. The Wall of Stars is going to be in the middle of the memorial when you're inside of it. Has 4,048 golden stars. Each star on that wall will represent 100 American soldiers that died during World War II. We lost over 400,000 soldiers in this war. So far, this remains the second bloodiest conflict in the history of the United States. The bloodiest conflict to date is our Civil War back in the 1860s, when we had anywhere from 600,000 to as many as 900,000 people that were killed. But World War II is the second bloodiest. Washington, D.C. Here's what you guys are going to want to do. You're going to want to make a circle around me. So all the way around, because what we're basically going to do is, I call it touring Washington in 30 seconds. Follow the umbrella, but we're going to start here. Washington Monument, we're going to come around to the right. Off in the distance, you see the domed roof of the Jefferson Memorial. That's our 3rd president. Coming around to the right, you can see the Lincoln Memorial off in the distance, the World War II Memorial between us and the Lincoln Memorial. Continuing around to the right, the south side of the White House. We basically just toured Washington in 30 seconds. Could have saved you all that time walking, but this is my favorite spot in Washington, D.C. because everything is just right around you. Do it for the crowd, do it for the crowd.
All right, tour is over. We're now in a place, an area called Georgetown, where we have some free time just to like eat and shop and do whatever. What do you want to go eat?
I don't know.
What are you feeling?
I'm feeling food, man.
Same. Alright, so I'm sitting here editing and I realized that I never really introduced that guy. That guy's name is Emilio. I believe he's from Sweden. Cool dude. He's going home tomorrow though, so that sucks. Anyway, back to the vlog. Alright, so everything is like super expensive here, so we chose pizza for lunch just because that was like more cheap than the other restaurants here. And it looks like it's pretty good pizza too, so yeah. Alright, let's try out this pizza. That's pretty good. That's pretty awesome. Look where we're sitting and eating too, like.
Yeah, and the sun just peeked out.
Yeah, it's awesome. Alright, so we're done eating. Pizza was awesome. Just kind of like walking around in the Georgetown area. We have until 5:30, so we have lots of free time. We still have like 2 hours. Alright, back at the hotel. Great day in Washington, D.C. Dude, it was good. But I got a question. I've been living in Mississippi for 9 months. Have not got sunburned. Well, maybe once, I don't remember. Never wore sunscreen, and I never really got sunburned. Then I come to Washington DC, and I look like a freaking lobster. For one day! What? I got some freaking sun today. I don't get it. I just don't. It's just... What? Alrighty guys, so I said I'm here for a day extra, and I am. Inna and Shane and all of them, like, they all had work. Like, they work throughout the summer. She had to work like all the way through July, I think, and Shane has the basketball team to take care of. They practice throughout the whole summer too. So I left on a Sunday. In that way, nobody had to take off work. And in that way, I also got a day more in Washington DC, so it's awesome. Waiting on Emilio, the guy that I like walking around DC with today. Planning on going to Subway, but I don't know where he is. He said just meet him in the lobby, so I bet none of you guys remember her.
Hey!
How's your year?
It was awesome, man. How was yours?
I had a freaking awesome year.
Same. That's so funny that you're here.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And I'm here an extra day, so I get to go to Washington DC again tomorrow.
With me.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
it is.
I'll have to go find a bikini.
Okay.
But I'll see you tomorrow. Or maybe.
Okay. See ya. Okay. That girl that was just like here, she was on the soft landing camp in New York City with me too, like on the same one, so that's kind of crazy. Alright, found Emilio.
What's up?
Subway's the move. Hashtag dinner.
Well, just a veggie.
Alright, let me get lettuce.
Pepper jack? Yes, please.
Tomatoes, onions, sweet onion sauce. Yes, that's it. Thank you. All right. Let's dig in.
Why does this keep happening to me?
What? What Wi-Fi are you on?
I don't know, I'm gonna figure it out.
No, so mine works perfectly fine. You just choose the Wi-Fi that's like available, and then put in your room number and then your last name. And it should be all fine.
It worked in my room.
You don't have to pay for anything.
I know, but it worked in my room. Oh, now it worked.
Anyways, guys, besides looking like a freaking lobster, today has been pretty daggone awesome. I don't know how much of the tour I'll film tomorrow, since I got like most of the tour today, but we'll see. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like down below, and remember to click that subscribe button, please. That would be freaking awesome. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.